Iran says it struck one of the most heavily guarded secrets in the Middle East, a wartime command bunker buried beneath Israel's military headquarters in the heart of Tel Aviv. That is not a minor claim. If true, it means an Iranian warhead reached the same hardened shelter where a sitting prime minister would be taken the moment a conflict escalates beyond conventional thresholds. The same facility where generals authorize retaliatory strikes. The same underground nerve center where, according to multiple Western intelligence assessments, Israel's nuclear second strike chain of command is maintained in continuity during active hostilities. Israel's response to that claim was immediate and, in its own way, revealing. Authorities sealed the surrounding streets. Cameras were physically blocked or repositioned. Military sensors suppressed domestic reporting. No spokesperson from the IDF or the Prime Minister's office issued a denial. No spokesperson issued a confirmation. The entire informational space around the claim was simply emptied, leaving the public with nothing to analyze except the silence itself. That bunker is real. It was constructed with direct American financial support, American engineering oversight, and enough electromagnetic shielding to maintain full operational capability, even if every communications system above the surface is destroyed. Understanding what sits beneath that compound, who built it, what it is designed to survive, and why Iran's claim that it struck the site cannot be easily dismissed is the central focus of what follows. Before we continue, thank you for being here. Your viewership is what makes this channel possible, and I genuinely appreciate every one of you who takes the time to watch, subscribe, and share. If you find value in this kind of analysis, please hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and pass this along. These are the things that determine whether more people get to see content like this. With that said, let us get into it. We are now past day 10 of active hostilities. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has launched more than 500 ballistic and cruise missiles and over 2,000 drones since the conflict opened. That is a sustained rate of fire that exceeds anything the Middle East has experienced in modern warfare. And unlike previous Iranian operations, which relied heavily on telegraphed, symbolic strikes designed to save face without provoking full-scale retaliation, this campaign has been deliberately targeted, publicly declared, and operationally relentless. The IRGC has named its objectives out loud. 27 American military installations across the region, Ben Gurion International Airport, 7 American and Israeli radar systems that Tehran claims have been degraded or destroyed. But the target that sits at the center of everything, the one that transforms this war from a missile exchange into a strategic confrontation over survivability, is the military headquarters compound known as the Hakirya, located in central Tel Aviv. Most people, including many informed observers, assume that Israel's military headquarters is a conventional above-ground complex with some reinforced shelter capacity underneath. That is a significant underestimation. The Hakirya district conceals a multi-layered network of underground command bunkers that Israel has been building, reinforcing, and expanding for decades. There are at least 2 confirmed installations that the public record allows us to examine. The first is designated Site 81. According to multiple reports, it is located beneath central Tel Aviv and functions as an electromagnetically shielded intelligence center spanning roughly 6,000 square meters. It was designed from the outset to survive electronic warfare, communications disruption, and sustained aerial bombardment. Its purpose is to ensure that Israeli intelligence operations continue to function even if every antenna, relay tower, and satellite uplink on the surface is destroyed or degraded. The second facility is more recent and, in many respects, more consequential. It is known as the Fortress of Zion. This is a deep underground command post constructed directly beneath the Hakirya compound. The New York Times was given rare access to a portion of this facility and described what it saw as a nerve center. Approximately 70 personnel sat across multiple levels, facing wall-mounted screens that displayed live tracking of incoming and outgoing strikes. During periods of active conflict, the Times reported, thousands of soldiers rotated through the site around the clock, managing everything from air defense coordination to offensive targeting in real time. This is what Iran is referring to when it claims to have struck underground command infrastructure in Tel Aviv. This is where Iranian missiles have been aimed. Now here's the precedent that makes the current claim more than propaganda. During the 12-day war between Iran and Israel in June 2025, a conflict that killed 28 Israelis and sent more than 3,000 to hospitals, Iranian ballistic missiles struck the north tower of the Da Vinci apartment complex in Tel Aviv. The impact zone was sealed. No cameras were permitted anywhere near the site. The Jerusalem Post later reported that the missile landed, in their words, a stone's throw from Netanyahu's office, then designated Building 22. In the weeks following that war, the Prime Minister's office began extensive renovations. Israeli officials have never confirmed or denied whether the building sustained structural damage. What is publicly verifiable is this. To this day, Google Maps blurs the satellite imagery over that section of Tel Aviv. On Leonardo da Vinci Street, directly in front of the towers, Google does not offer Street View. Russia's Yandex Maps does the same, censoring both imagery and geolocation data for the Da Vinci complex. France 24 conducted an independent analysis and concluded that Israeli media coverage of the Da Vinci strike had likely been deliberately delayed. Haaretz, one of Israel's most prominent newspapers, waited a full 2 weeks before publishing anything about the strike, even though photographs had already circulated widely on social media. Iran targeted this exact area before. The damage was sealed. The media was physically prevented from documenting it. The satellite data remains censored more than 9 months later. And now, in March 2026, the IRGC is claiming it struck the same zone again. We will return to the question of what that implies for Israel's ability to protect its deepest, most classified command infrastructure. But first, the scale of what has been falling on central Israel over the past 10 days needs to be understood in full. On day 1, approximately 90 ballistic missiles were fired at Israeli territory. On day 2, roughly 60. After that, the pattern shifted to approximately 20 per day, arriving in smaller but more frequent volleys. The individual salvos have gotten smaller, but the weapons themselves have gotten substantially larger, heavier, and more destructive. By March 5th, a military source told Iran's Fars news agency that the country had launched more than 500 ballistic and cruise missiles and over 2,000 drones. Iran claims 40% of that firepower was directed at Israel and 60% at American positions dispersed across the wider region. On the opening night of the war, a complete Iranian ballistic missile, an intact warhead carrying several hundred kilograms of high explosive, struck directly beside a Tel Aviv apartment building. Then, on March 1st, the single deadliest strike of the war hit Beit Shemesh. A missile carrying approximately 500 kilograms of explosives collapsed an underground civilian bomb shelter that was accessible by 2 flights of stairs. 9 people were killed. Investigators later concluded that even a fully code-compliant shelter, built to every Israeli civil defense specification, would not have survived a direct hit of that magnitude. The interceptor fired at that incoming missile missed. No mechanical failure was identified in the post-engagement review. The system engaged the target. It tracked the target. It fired. It simply did not connect. That single detail matters enormously, because it goes directly to the core debate running beneath this entire conflict. The White House claims that Iranian ballistic missile strikes dropped by 90% between day 1 and day 6, crediting joint American and Israeli operations against Iranian mobile launch platforms inside Iranian territory. But even with that reduction, missiles are still reaching Israeli soil. As of March 8th, 4 confirmed major impacts have struck the Israeli home front: Tel Aviv, Beit Shemesh, Beersheba, and a location in central Israel. Since the war began, 1,619 Israelis have been hospitalized. 87 remain in hospital beds. 4 are listed in critical condition. 10 Israeli civilians have been killed. The assumption most people carry is that Israel's multi-layered air defense network, Arrow, David Sling, Iron Dome, and the American-operated THAAD batteries, functions at near total effectiveness. In practice, the operational picture is more complicated. The fact that a Khorramshahr 4 cluster warhead can reach central Tel Aviv and scatter submunitions across a 500-meter radius tells a very different story about what the defense architecture is actually able to stop. The Khorramshahr 4, also designated K-bar, is the most destructive confirmed weapon in Iran's ballistic missile inventory. It was first publicly revealed in May 2023. It has an estimated range of approximately 2,000 kilometers. It carries a warhead of roughly 1,500 kilograms. Its cluster configuration is designed to open at approximately 7 kilometers altitude, releasing around 20 individual submunitions, each carrying roughly 2.5 kilograms of explosive material across an enormous dispersal zone. That dispersal pattern is what transforms a single missile from a precision threat into an area saturation weapon. For a densely built urban environment like the Tel Aviv metropolitan core, that changes the defensive mathematics entirely. Intercepting the carrier vehicle before it opens does nothing if the submunitions have already separated. And intercepting 20 independent falling objects simultaneously, each on a slightly different trajectory, is an order of magnitude more difficult than stopping a single inbound warhead. The IRGC confirmed it deployed this weapon during what it designated the 19th wave of Operation True Promise, targeting central Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport, and the Israeli Air Force's 27th Air Base, with warheads it described as weighing 1,000 kilograms. Israel disputed the claimed damage, insisting its defenses intercepted every overnight missile, though the IDF did acknowledge one morning strike that impacted open ground in a central town. Firefighters responded to 2 main impact zones in central Israel, where cluster munitions had scattered across residential and commercial areas. A first responder described finding a man in his 40s lying on the grass near one impact site with a severe shrapnel wound to his torso. This is the weapon category that makes underground bunker targeting relevant. A conventional unitary warhead needs a near-direct hit to threaten a buried, hardened facility. A cluster warhead does not need to penetrate the bunker itself. It turns the entire surface above that facility into a kill zone, shredding ventilation intakes, communications arrays, antenna masts, vehicle access ramps, and emergency egress points. If those submunitions are landing within the Hakirya compound footprint, the operational question shifts. It is no longer whether the warheads reached the neighborhood. It is whether the effects reached sufficient depth. And this is where the mirror image appears, the one both governments are pretending does not exist. Because while Iran is claiming to have struck Israel's underground command architecture, Israel carried out the verified, documented, publicly confirmed version of that exact same operation against Tehran. On March 6th, approximately 50 Israeli Air Force fighter jets dropped around 100 precision-guided munitions on the underground bunker of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei beneath the Supreme Leadership compound in central Tehran. The IDF announced total destruction of the facility. Intelligence assessments indicated the bunker extended beneath multiple city streets and contained meeting rooms, communication centers, entry tunnels, and command chambers used by the most senior officials in Iran's political and military hierarchy. Even after Khamenei's assassination on the opening day of the war, Israeli intelligence, specifically Unit 8200 and Unit 9900, the Signals Intelligence and Geospatial Intelligence branches, spent years mapping every corridor, every access point, and every structural weakness of that bunker before the strike order was given. The footage was released publicly. The confirmation was explicit and detailed. Iran has produced no equivalent evidence for its claimed strike on Israeli underground infrastructure. No satellite imagery, no structural analysis, no independent verification from any source. But the absence of proof is not the same as the absence of an event. Not when the impact area was physically sealed by Israeli security services. Not when the satellite imagery over the site remains blurred across every major mapping platform. Not when the same location was struck in June 25, and the media was prevented from documenting the aftermath. Both governments are engaged in the same strategic operation, hunting the other side's buried command architecture. One side showed its results, the other sealed the evidence. The asymmetry in disclosure does not necessarily indicate an asymmetry in outcome. Meanwhile, the broader consequences of this conflict continue to accelerate well beyond the borders of either country. Crude oil has crossed $115 a barrel, driven by disrupted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz and sustained damage to Gulf state energy infrastructure. More than 1,300 Iranian civilians are confirmed dead, including 194 children, according to the human rights activists' news agency. 7 American service members have been killed across military installations in the Middle East. The United States Navy has sunk more than 30 Iranian naval vessels, declaring Iran's conventional navy combat ineffective. The White House publicly states it requires 4 to 6 weeks to accomplish its stated military objectives, though it has not defined what those objectives are with any precision. On Israel's northern border, Hezbollah has opened fire from Lebanese territory, launching sustained barrages at Israeli positions and engaging Israeli ground forces near the border town of Edessa. The Islamic resistance in Iraq has joined the offensive with its own coordinated drone and missile strikes against American and allied targets. The conflict is no longer bilateral, it is regional. And then, on March 8, 2026, Iran installed Mojtaba Khamenei, the dead supreme leader's own son, as his replacement. The IRGC's entire senior command structure and Iran's full political and clerical leadership immediately pledged allegiance to him. That is not a footnote. It is the single most consequential variable in determining whether Iran's missile campaign can sustain coherence, discipline, and strategic direction under continued bombardment. Iran has just handed wartime command to a man who has never held public office, never commanded a military formation, and never occupied a formal institutional role of any kind. He inherits a war his father did not initiate, a military apparatus that has already burned through a substantial portion of its ballistic missile stockpile, and a civilian population absorbing catastrophic losses. Israeli intelligence estimates suggest more than 3,000 Iranian military personnel have been killed since the opening strikes. Whether Mojtaba Khamenei can maintain targeting discipline, logistical continuity, and coherent strategic direction while his country's infrastructure is being systematically dismantled from the air is the open question that every defense ministry, every intelligence service, and every head of state on the planet is watching right now. The sealed streets, the censored satellite maps, the enforced media blackouts, and a second consecutive war in which Iranian missiles have landed within the geographic footprint of the most classified command facility in the State of Israel. All of it points in one direction. This conflict has crossed thresholds that neither government anticipated crossing, and neither side has articulated what the end of this war is supposed to look like. Neither side can independently verify what the other is hiding beneath the rubble. And with Mojtaba Khamenei now holding the codes, the question is no longer whether this escalates. It is whether anyone remaining in either capital has a credible plan for what comes after it does. Thank you for watching. I genuinely appreciate your time and your support. Join the discussion in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. Who do you think holds the strategic advantage at this stage of the conflict? Do you think the war has already moved beyond the point where either side can control the outcome? Let me know. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Click the video on screen to continue with the next piece of analysis. I will see you soon.